Somewhere between reality and imagination lies the realm of the paranormal. A place filled with spirits, magic, and the unexplained. Come with us on our journey to discover if the stories are true or if they are all just smoke and mirrors.
Hey folks, welcome to Smoke and Mirrors, the podcast that dives deep into the cases of the paranormal, the unusual, and the unexplained to separate the facts from the fiction. I am your host, Darrell.
And I'm Cindi. And today we're going to be talking about haunted and cursed dolls and the history behind the belief in these objects. Then we'll tell the stories of two such dolls, Joliet and Harold.
First, you ought to tell the story of how that dance I was doing was so awesome.
You've never been sexier.
I know. I'm oozing machismo. All right, so what are your feelings generally on dolls? Or do they creep you out? Or
Some dolls creep me out. Some dolls don't bother me at all. You know, Kyle is super scared of dolls. So
let us explain. Kyle is one of our nephews.
Yeah.
So she just said Kyle like you all would know who Kyle was.
Well, I was talking to you, and you do know who Kyle is.
Yeah, but our listeners don't.
Well, Kyle's my nepson, and he has always been super scared of dolls, so I've always liked to hide them around places so he'll find them and be scared, but they haven't really ever scared me unless they're clown dolls.
Yeah, no, you're pretty much deathly afraid of clowns and anything that has to do with clowns.
Yes, anything clown related I stay away from.
But you've got an aunt that collects dolls too, I think.
Two aunts, because Trisha collected porcelain dolls, and her mother and her aunt. So both of my aunts, my twin aunts, collect porcelain dolls.
And some of those are a little bit weird, you know.
Some of them look so lifelike that they're a little bit creepy. And I actually have a doll from when I was little that I found again when we were moving this last time that's a little bit creepy looking, but it didn't scare me.
Yeah, and we'll get into that, why that happens. So
why are dolls creepy to so many people, and how did the idea of cursed or haunted dolls come about? The fear of dolls is known as pediophobia. Psychologists who have studied this phenomenon say that children are not born with this fear, but instead learn it from movies, pop culture, or stories told by older relatives and friends.
Yeah, I mean, you take a movie like Child's Play or whatever, you know, and it's automatically going to get in the psyche. Now, another issue is what's known as the uncanny valley effect. This is the idea that the more human-like an artificial creation becomes, the more disquieted we feel until we are utterly repulsed by it. This is why we are more likely to respond better to robots that are less human-like. So that goes back to what you were saying before about because the dolls looked so human that they gave you the creeps.
And I feel like if you stare at them too long, you eventually start to feel like they're staring back at you.
It's because they have those unblinking eyes. They're constantly open and staring straight ahead.
Yeah, which makes sense. So these things, along with the sordid history of dolls being used in ritual magic, have jaded many people's opinions on the beloved children's toys. So how did it all begin? The earliest known use of dolls in negative ways was during the reign of Ramses II in Egypt. It is said that magicians made wax effigies known as poppets to place a death curse on Ramses.
And more well known are the roles of dolls in the predecessor of today's voodoo and hoodoo rituals, West African fetish magic. These dolls would be made from cloth or animal hides and stuffed with totemic substances known as bolongo. People believed these objects had great power and contained the souls of their ancestors. The owner would place the fetish in or directly outside their home, and every time they wanted to make a wish or a fortune or harm someone they knew, the owner would drive nails through the head or body. Chicken blood or other materials would be poured over it, creating a crust. And because of that, these dolls were known for their pungent, smoky odor. And many people claim they had a malevolent aura.
These rituals were brought to places like Haiti, the Caribbean, and New Orleans through the slave trade, and over the years became the basis for the use of voodoo dolls and other ritual magic practices. Now, see, when we were talking about dolls creeping me out, I totally forgot about voodoo.
It's one of those things where I think that's the first thing people associate with voodoo is the voodoo dolls. And you can see the direct correlation from the dolls that they were driving nails into whenever they wanted to make a wish or harm someone, and the needles being placed in voodoo dolls. So now that we know some of the history behind the phenomena of cursed and haunted dolls, we're going to examine the stories of Joliet and Harold, one cursed and one haunted.
Joliet the doll was a little girl's dream. With green eyes that sparkled and ruby red lips, there was no way the unfortunate recipient of this seemingly innocent toy could have known the evil curse that lay within or the heartbreak such an object could bring. Such are the claims of a woman simply known as Anna G., whose family had owned and cared for the doll for 4 generations. The doll was given to Anna's great-great-grandmother by a family friend as a gift for the upcoming birth of her second child. What her ancestor didn't know was that this particular friend was a jealous, spiteful woman. No one knows the root of her jealousy, but some speculate that it came from her inability to have children, or that she had been a spurned lover of her great-grandfather. Either way, the curse laid upon this childlike vessel would bring heartache to generations of women in the family. The birth of the second child went smoothly, and by all accounts, the child appeared to be a healthy baby boy. 3 days later, a mysterious illness fell upon the child, and soon he was dead. It wouldn't be long before Anna's great-grandmother noticed the crying of a small infant coming from the doll. She believed the soul of her newly deceased son was trapped within the doll, and as such, she cared for it until passing it to her only daughter. The curses continue to this day in Anna's family, as each generation has had 2 children, a daughter and a son. The sons of each respective family have mysteriously died shortly after birth and added the cry of another infant to the cursed effigy. Anna says the family will continue to care for the doll as it will be passed to her daughter as well, a seemingly never-ending cycle of both heartache and compassion for those who are lost to a curse born from jealousy and deceit.
All right, let's get into this, because one of the things that I noticed was that no matter where I looked, the story was always the same. The problem I had with it was that the story was always the same. You know, usually when you're doing research on something, you're going to get multiple stories or multiple accounts. But in this situation, it's always just the one.
Yeah, I noticed that also, but if that's the only thing the doll does, then there would only be one story. It's not like they're claiming a multitude of things happen from the doll. They're saying, we have a daughter, she's healthy, we have a son, he seems healthy. A few days later, unfortunately, the baby passes away, and then the doll absorbs the cry or something.
Yeah, absorbs the soul of that child.
Yeah. So I think that's probably why that's the only story we can find, because that's the only thing that is happening.
Here's the other thing that bothers me about this particular doll. Now, one, there are pictures that you can find of Joliet on the internet. They're not always the same picture, but the ones that I found that were the most consistent were the ones that were used in the description that I wrote. When I look at that doll, I just see a doll. I mean, it just looks like an everyday doll. Here's the other problem I had with the story. While it says that this family has owned this thing for 4 generations, and it gave a name of just Anna G., you can't find anything about anyone claiming to really own this doll. And I mean, I searched for, days trying to find out who Anna G was. So either they're the most private person in the world, and they don't use social media and they don't share this story, or this story is completely fabricated?
Well, the first thing you said about the doll looking just like a normal doll, it would probably have to look like a normal doll, because if someone came to me and said, "Oh, you're getting ready to have a child, let me give you this doll," and it looked like Satan, I'm not going to take it. So giving me something cute and sweet and that looks like just a totally normal doll is going to be better. As far as nobody being able to find out who this Anna G is, if this were our family, I wouldn't share the story either. I mean, you wouldn't want people knocking on your door and calling you and...
Yeah, I understand that. But essentially, in order for the story to get out, someone had to have told it. And if it was Anna G who told the story, then, that's the thing. And I also tried to look for the origin of this story, where it came from, when the first time it showed up. And I couldn't find that either. And usually you can pretty well trace back whenever the first time a story makes an appearance. And in this situation, there just wasn't. There was no trail to follow. And that's what kind of bothered me, I guess, the most about it.
Well, I don't believe even a little bit of this story, which is weird because I believe a lot of stuff that we talk about. You're more the skeptic. I'm more the, oh my gosh, let's run away because something's going to kill us. I just don't believe this one. I don't know if just because it made me so sad to read it, that these women can't have a son, and as horrible as this doll is to them for killing their baby, they have to keep it and care for it because it actually has their baby's soul in it. If that were really the case, it would be a horrible circumstance. So maybe that's why I choose not to believe it, but I don't think that this one is true.
And I would think that at some point the owners would say, okay, let's try to do something to release the spirits, and then we can get rid of the doll. And you don't see anything about that either. There's just nothing.
Yeah, and also I saw that only the mothers can hear the cries. Their husbands, their children, nobody else can hear it until they actually have a baby and take possession of the doll, and then they can hear it.
All right, so let's move on to our second doll. And our second doll is named Harold. Now, Harold the Haunted Doll, or just Haunted Harold as he's known on the internet, is one of the most famous and interesting cases of haunted articles. The thing is, there's the myth that's prevalent everywhere you look, and then there's the lesser known true story of Harold. So let's begin with the story told the most. Harold was the first ever haunted doll to be sold on eBay. The doll was called Haunted Harold, and thousands of people were viewing and bidding on the item. This is the original post as it was found on eBay. I'm sure it's happened to each of us at least once or twice. You're walking around the flea market or the antique mall looking for a treasure or two, and you come upon a beat-up looking doll. You think to yourself, oh, that's charming, or the child who owned this doll must have really loved that thing. But what I thought after seeing the doll that day should never ever be repeated. But here we go to repeat it. This doll was purchased in a small dirt lot flea market in the quaint town of Webster, Florida. Webster is a very charming, industrious town about 60 miles west of Gainesville. They have a weekly flea market offering treasures, bargains, and aisles of kernel corn. Anyways, I digress. I had arrived at the flea market fairly late in the day when most people were packing to go home. That is when I saw an elderly man placing the doll in a box. It looked interesting, so I asked the man if I could see it. The conversation went something like this. Man, you don't want to see this doll. Me, sure I do. What do you want for it? Man, well that's a good question, because it's very old. The man looked like he was going to cry. It was my son's. I bought it for him when he was born, and he passed away a few years after. The doll has sat in my work shed for over 60 years. I wasn't going to bring it out today, but I figured I just needed to get it out of here. Anyway, I want $30 for it. I gave the guy $20, put it in a bag, and walked away. When I was halfway down the aisle, the man came running over, visibly out of breath. Man, I have to warn you about something. I can't just let you take him like this. The reason it's been in my shed is that the doll brought an eerie presence into our house after our son died. We would hear crying and singing from his bedroom. When we went to check it out, there was nothing, just the doll. Other things started to happen, and our priest told me I should burn the doll. I tried and tried, but it would barely burn. That's why his arms and head are so worn. Anyway, I just wanted to let you know. I told him okay and chuckled to myself as I walked away. That was until I got home, and my life has never been the same. 2 days later, my cat died, my girlfriend left me for the pool guy, I began to have chronic migraines, and this is only 2 days after purchasing the doll. A week later, I began to hear children laughing and crying in my basement. Every time I would go check it out, of course, nothing. The doll has been in an armadillo coffin in my basement for the last year and a half, and I need to get rid of it. I really do believe it's cursed. Sometimes I touch it, and it seems like it has a pulse. Maybe I'm just paranoid. Maybe not. The cursed doll measures 21 inches tall. Its hands, arms, and legs are all composition. The eyes are closed when it's lying down. Please ask any and all questions before you bid on this doll. I have not had it out of the coffin for years, so if anything else happens this week, I'll be sure to let you know. This auction is sold as is, with no returns, please. Ask all questions before you bid. Even if you think you are sure about condition, pictures, etc., please ask all specific questions before bidding. Thanks for looking, and good luck. The doll had over 100,000 views, and the winning bid was $700, but the buyer did not pay. It was then sold to the second highest bidder for $300. Soon after receiving the doll, the new owner quickly sold the doll to a friend of the family, stating that she couldn't handle the doll's presence in her house. A week after getting the doll, a friend came over to see what all the fuss was about. A month after viewing Harold, she was diagnosed with brain cancer and quickly died. A week later, another friend came by the house and was interested in Harold. Again, within a month, tragedy befell the friend when he fell down a flight of stairs, breaking his neck and dying. But these weren't the only occurrences. One night, Harold's owner heard footsteps coming from downstairs. When she went to check, she found Harold sitting upright in a chair with an evil grin on his face. She locked the doll in the basement until she could sell it. He has been passed from owner to owner ever since, with no one keeping him for long. That's a pretty scary story.
You think so?
Well, it's something if you got a doll, and we know Harold is actually real because, one, there's pictures, and two, there's a guy who says he's the owner.
But is he really cursed?
Now, that's a question. Now, this is the story that you'll see circulated on the internet, and multiple places I looked all had pretty much this same story.
That's all I found when I was looking.
All right. Fortunately, I found the person who owned him, and he had a website that was devoted to talking about Harold. And he told the story of how he obtained Harold and the things that had occurred in Harold's past and why he believed that Harold wasn't so much haunted as cursed. So let's get into the true story.
So here's the true story of Haunted Harold as told by his current owner, Anthony Quinata. You can find his story on haroldthehaunteddoll.com. In 2003, an aspiring young filmmaker named Greg put a composition doll he claimed was haunted up for auction on eBay. The listing became the subject of websites, articles, and discussions around the world. The doll was even discussed on Art Bell's Coast to Coast radio show. A video was shown in which the doll's arm supposedly moved, as well as its mouth, as the word "here" or "Harold," according to Greg, was heard. Harold became the doll's name, and it stuck. Greg did all of this hoping to get $30 or $40 for a doll he thought he would sell for $9 otherwise. When the auction ended, the winning bid was around $700. But the winning bidder failed to pay for the doll, so Greg relisted it. He freely admitted that what he was doing was a hoax to Kathy, a childhood friend of his older brother, who was bidding on Greg's second auction of the doll. Not that Kathy cared, she was hoping to capitalize on the sensationalism around the doll and flip it for a profit herself after keeping it for 3 or 4 months. After winning Greg's auction, strange events started happening almost immediately after she got it, according to Kathy. Not knowing whether the doll was, in fact, the cause of the things that were happening or what to do about it, she eventually put the doll away in a closet. Instead of reselling it after a couple of months, she ended up keeping it for a year. In 2004, Kathy put the doll back up on eBay, claiming that the doll wasn't haunted, but was in fact cursed. Only this time, it wasn't simply a claim she was making for the sake of selling the doll. She sincerely believed it was. Here was her listing. I am the person who bought the doll from Greg. I was living in Ireland at the time. The doll did not move on its own, or smell of Pampers, or speak. It did, however, contribute to 2 deaths within a 6-month period, and some other creepy stuff while I had it because I wanted to restore it. This doll was cursed, and while I had it, 2 people I knew died within 6 months of each other under tragic circumstances, and crazy stuff used to happen in my Dublin home. When I wrapped it up and put it away, nothing happened. When it was in the house and not in the storage shed, creepy things would happen. We had a roommate who was a health nut, climbed mountains, dove, was a very athletic guy. Harold was stored in the closet in his room. 3 months after moving in, Stephen was diagnosed with lung cancer and died a few weeks later. He had to move in with us because Ronnie, the woman who he was living with, asked to see the doll the weekend before she went to Amsterdam for a visit. She fell down a flight of stairs while she was there and died instantly. Also, one day I heard a crash coming from the bathroom. I went in there only to find that everything had fallen out of the linen closet and everything landed perfectly folded and stacked. In addition, I was on the phone with my fiance when all of a sudden I hear someone scream in the background that there was a huge brown wolf spider crawling up his back. At the same time, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a huge brown hairy spider scurry across the living room rug and into the bathroom. 2 hours later, Rick came home and showed me the area on the back of a shirt where someone had killed the spider. Anthony put a ridiculous bid on Harold, hoping to win the doll. Upon his bidding, Kathy began to email Anthony, explaining that she believed that the doll was not haunted, but instead cursed. Anthony emailed back and forth with Kathy, assuring her that he indeed wanted the doll, all the while being in a bidding war over the item on eBay. Anthony eventually won the doll for $720, and it was soon delivered to his house. Anthony says that after receiving the doll, he did some EMF tests, took pictures, and did some EVP work, but got no evidence that anything was paranormal about the doll. He decided he would rather be safe than sorry, so he put the doll away with a crucifix and some holy water until a friend of his could do a reading on Harold. When his friend April came to do the reading, Anthony was disappointed to find she had heard of the doll and was skeptical that her reading would be influenced by the prior knowledge. He decided to do an audio recording of the reading, which began with him sprinkling holy water on the doll. April chuckled and began her session, only to stop after 2 minutes. When asked why she stopped, April replied, "Because the doll just threatened to kill me. I have a heart murmur, and it feels as though the spirit in the doll is squeezing my heart." Disappointed and in disbelief, Anthony put Harold away. Later, when he reviewed the recording, he was stunned. As he was sprinkling the doll with holy water, he heard agonized screams. Then he heard April chuckle and ask, "You're sprinkling it with holy water?" A male voice responded, "Shut up." Then as she was doing her reading, a voice said, "I'm going to kill you, you bitch." It was after that he heard April explaining that she felt as though the doll was trying to kill her. What followed was what could only be described as an evil laugh. Since then, Anthony has become a believer in the idea that Harold is indeed haunted. A second medium who knew nothing about Harold explained that there was a spirit trapped inside the doll. Also, several unfortunate incidents have occurred to the owner and his friends after viewing Harold.
Again, this story comes from the current owner, and you can see how there are little nuggets of truth in the original story, but it's not exactly correct. Like, there was cancer, but it wasn't brain cancer, it was lung cancer. They did have someone who fell down steps and died. But what you find out is that originally the whole thing was a giant hoax. So what occurred between Greg selling the doll as a hoax and his friend Kathy buying the doll? I'm not quite sure what occurred.
I feel like you believe this story.
You know, I don't believe the story. I'm always a skeptic, but what I'm trying to do is find out if you think this story has any truth to it. Now, let me tell you this. The guy who owns the doll, on his website, if you go there, he does have audio recordings of Harold the doll. So, he shows this as proof. Now, let me say this too. I invited Anthony to come on the show because I wanted him to be able to defend what he has as proof instead of us just making assumptions about it. He did not respond to my invite to come on the show. So I will say this, the audio clips that he has, he says it sounds like someone crying. To me, it sounds like there's a cat somewhere. That's just my opinion. The other thing too that kind of bothers me is that while he says he took an audio recording of the original reading that his friend did and says that the things that Harold said, that audio recording is not on his website to be reviewed as actual evidence. So I'm wondering where that recording is or if it actually exists.
Well, even if there was a recording on his website of that, it's just an audio recording, so it really could be anything.
You can tell if something's been manipulated, though, audio-wise.
Yeah, but I mean, he can say, oh, listen, here's Harold, and then his best friend John be like, oh, shut up,
Yeah.
I mean, you know what I mean? There's no way to prove that it was Harold unless you're actually looking at the doll and hearing it or seeing it speak.
Yeah, and that's true. Now, the only thing that gives this guy a remote amount of credibility is that he was willing to, one, go through and correct the story that was going around on the internet, which means that he at least wanted to get what he felt like was the true story out there and available. He's done some videos, and one of the things that he had happen was the guys from Ghost Adventures came out and checked the doll, which, folks, I don't know what you think about the guys from Ghost Adventures. It's entertainment, and that's as far as I'll go on it. However, at least he's willing to have this doll scrutinized.
That's true. That's true. So he either thinks that it's real, maybe, or he's a pretty good actor in trying to convince people that he thinks it's real. I haven't been to his website. I haven't seen the Ghost Adventures video, but I don't know. I don't think that it's true. I don't think that, could it be true? I guess. I mean, I would imagine that the devil could hop into anything and control it. And I mean, could there be a voodoo curse on it? That seems more likely because I'm pretty sure that people can do voodoo curses. But stuff like this doesn't really scare me. So it's hard for me to believe that it's true. However, would I ever own a Chucky doll? No. So
you're a skeptic as long as it's not near you.
Correct. While I'm a skeptic of this, at my core, I'm still a big chicken. So I don't, I don't know that if this guy said, hey, come to my house and hold Harold the doll and see for yourself. I don't know that I would actually do that because while I don't believe that he's haunted, there's a little part of me that, he might be. So I don't want any part of that.
And the thing is, there's an open invitation for Anthony to come on the show and talk to us about him. I mean, I'm willing to let him share his side and his version of events.
Yeah, I would love that.
So here's the way I see things. I'm a complete skeptic until something occurs that cannot be explained in any way, shape, or form. Now, for me, probably 95% of the things that occur that people think are paranormal can be explained. It's that 5% that intrigues me, because that's the part that if you don't know an explanation, you can't find an explanation. Science cannot explain it. What else do you call it but paranormal?
Yeah, and I am at the opposite end of the spectrum.
Except for on these two dolls.
Except for this, which I don't understand. Maybe I've grown up in the past year that we've been on hiatus and I'm not as chicken as I once was. But normally we do these stories and I'm totally convinced that what we're reading and researching and talking about is true and it's scary and I don't like it, and you a lot of times will throw stuff at me that you've read and haven't told me about. You like to spring stuff on me. And then I, oh, okay, so whatever, maybe it's not true. But it's not true unless you're convinced otherwise. And I am. It is true unless I'm convinced otherwise. And I'm not really sure why the story of these dolls is not ringing true for me. Although I can be 100% honest right now and tell you all that while I'm saying I don't believe these stories, the hair on my arms is starting to stand up and I'm a little bit concerned now that I'm totally freaked out that there's a doll in the closet behind us. Look at the hair. I mean, I have goosebumps, right? Feel my arm.
Yeah, the hair on her arm is standing straight up.
I'm totally freaked up.
She's got goosebumps too.
Yeah, I feel like something's getting ready to attack me. So.
And that's the thing. I think a lot of these stories get told and it has that effect on people. Now, I also have a theory that because we don't exactly know how reality works, when a situation like this, where you've got a guy who was setting it up as a hoax, selling it as a hoax, but had a story that he had created behind it and had enough people believing that this doll was somehow haunted or cursed, it's a possibility that many people believing caused this item to maybe actually become cursed. Because like when we talked about the episode on curses, the reason curses work is because the person who's been cursed believes it and ties everything that's bad back to that curse, which is obviously what we can see has been done with Kathy.
Or maybe the original owner was a bad guy and he cursed the doll and then acted like it was just a story to get people hyped up so he could get the devil doll out into the public. Now I'm twice as freaked out.
Okay, so now we've made a complete U-turn with Cindi.
Yeah.
From non-believing to suddenly...
I've convinced myself that it's true.
And for me, another thing is I'm a research-based guy. And there are times that I'll see stories and be convinced at first that it seems legitimate. And then the more I dig into it, the less legitimate the story becomes for me. Because I start seeing contradictions and I start seeing all these other things. But like I said, I'm not going to completely discount this guy while I am skeptical. And I'll be skeptical till the day I die because I'm just skeptical of these things. Like I said, the fact that he's at least willing to put it out there for public scrutiny says something about him. All right. Now, whether dolls can be used to bring about curses, hauntings, and powerful magic, or if the belief is simply a combination of the uncanny valley effect and vivid imaginations, we cannot say. It's up to you to decide what you think is real and what is just smoke and mirrors.
I've missed that. So before we end the show, we wanted to tell you a little bit about our Patreon. For as little as $2 a month, you get double the amount of Smoke and Mirrors with exclusive Patreon episodes coming out every other Monday. That means you'll get 28 weeks of the show instead of 14. And you can never get too much Darrell and Cindi. So check it out by clicking the link in the description and becoming a part of the Smoke and Mirrors family.
You'll definitely want to become a member because the first bonus episode we cover are the stories of Mandy and Peggy the doll. And you don't want to miss it because I'm pretty sure that these two stories will freak you out. Simply because not only do we know the dolls really exist, but because the sources that the stories come from are credible. So we'll see how she does with that one.
I don't want to do that one.
Also, if you are in or around the Tennessee, Georgia, Alabama, and Kentucky area and believe you are dealing with a paranormal activity in your home, let us know and our friends at Rap Paranormal will get in touch with you. You can contact us at smokeandmirrorspod@gmail.com or call and leave us a message at 931-368-8747 and we'll get in contact with you. Thanks for joining us for this episode. If you like the show, help us grow by going to iTunes and leaving us a rating and a review. Or leave us a comment on Spreaker, Blueberry, iHeartRadio, Spotify, or on our website at parafiles.net, where you can find podcasts, videos, and Paralopedia, your source for everything paranormal. Or just search for Smoke and Mirrors Paranormal on your favorite podcast player. If it isn't there, let us know. We'll be happy to get it added for you.
Also, you can find us on Facebook at Smoke and Mirrors Paranormal. Give it a like and join the discussion group so you can let us know what you think of the show. We'll be happy to respond. And if you want to keep up with the show on Twitter, follow us at Parapodcaster and at RapTN.
That's RAPPTN.
Finally, remember to send in your stories of paranormal encounters to smokeandmirrorspod@gmail.com. We're putting together episodes of just listener stories and would love to read yours. Thanks again so much for listening and subscribing. Have a great night.
Yay, I'm glad to be back.
Woohoo!